Melanie, thank you so much for being in the show today. From what I remember, Melanie, you grew up in Canada, right? So it's pretty
Yes.
much a country with its own distinct culture, history, and way of life. Now, moving to Finland, it's definitely a place with its own unique social codes and nuances. It must have been quite the shift. Can you tell me a little bit about what initially brought you here and what has been the transition like for you?
Sure. So I'm originally from Canada, and actually it's been, I would say, a bit of an easy transition, maybe because I have this theory, and there is actually uh, evidence to back it up, but I've always thought that kind of cold countries are similar in personality in the way that they live, and warm countries are similar in personality in the way they live. So I think that Finns and Canadians, that we have a lot in common. The landscape is very similar. The climate is very similar. If you're driving down the highway from Helsinki to Lahti, for instance, it looks like you could be driving down Highway 17 in Ontario. Same kind of look. We have those fences along the sides of the road so the deer can't jump in, that kind of thing. So we have those. So it's very similar, that way. So, I came here as an English language teacher. I was living in Brazil before I came to Finland, and I was teaching English there. After I graduated from university, I wanted to travel, and I didn't have money. So, and I had student loans to pay, because we have tuition fees in Canada. So I had student loans to pay, and I wanted to travel, but I thought, how am I going to do this? And I did a degree in English literature and anthropology. And so I thought I can teach. I had a bit of teaching experience. I thought I can teach. And so I went and did a course on teaching English as a second language, me with two of my best friends from school. And we decided that we were going to move to Brazil and teach there English. We got a job, all three of us together. So, we were like 21, 22, moved to Brazil, to the southern part of Brazil, lived there for a year. And then we all decided, my two friends, Penny and Jocelyn, they went back to Canada, but I wasn't finished yet. So I had decided that I wanted to come to Europe. And at that time, they were just starting to post job opportunities and stuff online. And I found this job in Finland, and it sounded different, It sounded kind of cool and not the usual, oh, let's go to Paris, let's go to London, that kind of thing. And it was a little bit unique. So, and it was with a company called Linguarama, a school called Linguarama, and they had 40 schools across Europe. So I thought, if I get my foot in the door with them, then maybe I can move somewhere else, do 1 year with them, and then I can go somewhere else in Europe. So I got the job in Lahti, where I live. It was there was only 3 of us in the school there. In Helsinki, they had a big school, and in Lahti, there were just 3 teachers and our boss. And they hired me there because I was an inexperienced teacher, and they thought I couldn't maybe handle the clients in Helsinki. So we basically went into companies and taught business English in companies. So that's what we did. Yeah. And so I worked, I got the job with Linguarama, and then I met my husband, and I never left. So that whole plan to go teach all over Europe with the same company didn't actually happen. And then I was working with Linguarama for about 4 years, and they said to me, if you want to, we will pay for you to do your master's degree in teaching English as a second language, because if you want to move up in that world, you need to be more qualified than just having a certificate to teach English. So they said that they would pay for me, and then I could be like the director of studies for the company in Finland. So I went and did my master's degree at the University of Sheffield in England. They paid for everything. It took me 2 years. And then after that, I worked for them for 1 more year, and they closed down their whole business in Finland. So I didn't have to work for them anymore. I worked for them for 1 year. They paid for all my education. I didn't have to work for them anymore. And I took all the clients that I had in Lahti, and I started my own company. So I kept all of who I was teaching. I didn't even have to do any marketing. And I just started working for myself. And I did that until I went on maternity leave with my daughter in 2012. And that was kind of when the recession hit in Finland, and companies were not putting money into language training anymore. I had one main company I was working for. It was a paper mill called Myllykoski Paper near Kouvola. And I would go there 3 days a week, and everyone who wanted one had a 45-minute English lesson with me, private English lesson with me. So it was really lucrative for me and really nice for them, you know. But then the recession hit, and actually Myllykoski Paper got sold to UPM, and then I was kind of out of a job. Well, my hours were getting diminished, and I thought, what am I going to do now? And I had been doing a little bit of other work too with, we have Paijulahti Sports Institute and Viromäki Sports Institute right near Lahti, and they both have bachelor degree programs. In Paijulahti, they have one where they are 1 year studying phys ed at their campus, and then they go for 3 years to the States to Everett College in North Carolina, and they do the rest of the Bachelor of Physical Education there. So they wanted to get their students ready to be in that English-speaking environment. So I used to spend a couple of days there as well, teaching those students. And then I was doing a little bit in Viromäki as well. They have a lot of coaching courses and a lot of coaching degrees there. So I was doing a little bit of English there. So I kind of got into the university field, and I liked it. I liked working with the students in the university. And I thought, well, maybe it's time to make a career change, because I'm kind of sick of going into companies. It's very lonely, you know, working for yourself. And I would go in. Of course, I made friends and connections with my students, but I would go in, teach them, and leave. So I thought, maybe I will pursue this university thing a little bit more. And at the same time, I decided to become IELTS, you know, IELTS, the English language testing system, International English language testing system. They were advertising they needed an examiner in Helsinki. And I thought, that might be interesting. So I went and interviewed for that, and I got that job, and then I got trained, because you have to be, you know, you have to become certified to be an IELTS examiner. So I went and did that. So I was working as an IELTS examiner and doing a little bit of other bits and pieces. And then the job here at HUMC came up. That was in 2015. And I interviewed for that, and I got it. And it was probably my best career move ever, because getting to work with students, especially this age, I'm not one that would want to work with kids. I'm not a big fan of kids, to be honest. So I'm not one that would want to work with kids. But, you know, this age group, and then like the part-time group as well. I really loved teaching I love teaching the part-time group. I love teaching those adults that are already in the workforce and have so much to give and so much to offer. So yeah, it's been really good. So that's kind of how I got here and how I stayed here. And I think that life in Finland is easy. I always say that my life in Lahti with 2 kids and a husband, and well, we had a dog, but she passed away, is like what it was like growing up in 80s Canada, like in the 1980s in Canada. It's, you know, we didn't have to lock our doors. I come from small town Ontario, 8,000 people, close to Ottawa, the capital. And I never had a house key. We didn't have to lock our doors. We didn't have to, you know, we played out in the street. We had a park like near our backyard where we always played. Neighborhood kids where we're together all the time. Good schools. I have my girlfriends from when I was like 8 to now my age. We're still great friends. You know, that's what it was like growing up in the 80s in Canada. And I feel like it's like that here. You know, I don't have to worry about my kids. They walk to school. When they were younger, now they're 17 and 13. So they're pretty independent. But when they were younger, you know, the park was literally in our backyard practically. I could send them out there. They could go and play. I didn't have to worry about anyone taking them or anything bad happening to them. School is really good. Healthcare is really good. So it's a very, I think, similar lifestyle to what I grew up in. So it hasn't been much of an adjustment. Of course, it takes a while to make friends with Finns and to kind of make that circle, that friendship circle. I have it now, but it took me quite a while to build those relationships. Finns don't trust so easily. Yeah. So I think that it takes a while maybe to make those deep friendship connections here compared to Canadians. Maybe we're a little bit more open that way. But then also, I'm sure that you've noticed that once you make those connections and those friends, you have them for life, and they're there for you, and they're part of your life always. So that's maybe a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's quite an impressive story you have there. When we first met, of course, you being my professor, you just kind of hear, oh yeah, I'm from Canada, and I'm here with my husband. But then hearing now the complete story behind it is quite impressive. And I suppose it seems to me like a lot of people that I have met here have a very different story, but at the same time, it always comes down to somebody. Because of somebody, I ended up staying here.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So in this case, it was your husband. In terms of the connections, for me personally, that one, I think I'm still working on it. Because, well, when I left Mexico, for example, my life was very different than what it is here. And, well, Mexico is very different than Canada, than Finland. But I think I'm still trying to find ways to build a community. It's very different, and I'm still trying to adjust, and I'm trying to learn a little bit more about the culture. Something that I was talking about with this Norwegian professor, her name is Nina Vitocek. I was telling her, well, it's very interesting on finding ways that you can learn about a culture, because you can read about it in books, you could go out and walk into the forest, you could pick berries, but you're not necessarily learning the culture. So some of the discussions that we were having is, or at least for me to understand, is what is sort of the back engineering of Nordic culture, to sort of understand why people are the way they are, why society is the way that it is. And I think that has helped me a little bit into understanding them a little bit more. But at the same time, I don't know if this ever happened to you. As an expat, you come to a new country, it's welcoming, people are nice, but at the same time, to me at least, I felt like I was kind of stuck in this place in the middle between I'm not at home, I'm in a country that it's foreign to me, to my culture, to my language. I'm trying to adapt, so you sort of get stuck like in this place in between. It's like, it's kind of hard to fit in. At least that's what I have found. Of course, I have found now like a little group of people, but it's actually mainly foreigners.
Yeah.
I do have a group of Finns that eventually we meet a few times during the year to go camping, for example.
Okay.
But it's a little bit, it's very different than the groups I was kind of used to. And maybe that's something that as a foreigner, you kind of have to, or that's something that I have learned as a foreigner, is that I couldn't expect to create the same kind of connections that I was accustomed to creating back in my country. It's a very different kind of connection that you create here. So yeah, that has been just my experience here. But did you ever have any of those? While you were going through your transition here, did you ever have any like, oh shit moment that I'm in Finland now and it seems that I'm going to be here for the rest of my life?
I think I still have those.
Yeah.
And I still think about, God, first of all, now, because I'm a lot older than you, so I'm getting, up there in age, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do when I retire? And I don't want to retire here. I can't even imagine retiring and that kind of thing here. So luckily, my husband is from Kenya, so he doesn't want to retire here either. So we're both kind of trying to navigate that. Like, what do we want to do when we're finished work? Where do we want to live after that? What about the kids? All of that kind of thing. So I still have those moments where I'm like, is this really where I want to be? I have those quite frequently, actually. And maybe more and more lately, I don't know if that's the rise of populism in Europe is starting to get on my nerves. Although I have to admit that what's happened recently in the States has really kind of thrown me for a loop. And actually, our mutual neighbor, you and I both have a mutual neighbor.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Who really wants to take over our countries, and and, you know, charges 25% in tariffs and really is causing... The one great thing I think that's coming out of this whole Trumpism is that he's bringing Canadians closer together. We've been quite divided for a while because populism is on the rise in Canada as well. And we have a problem now with the Liberal Party. Our Prime Minister just resigned, all of this. Yeah. So there's been a lot of political stuff going on in Canada where we've been very divided. Since COVID, we've been very, very divided. And but now we all have a mission because we're all against Trump, right? Because everyone's like, buy Canadian, or buy Mexican. You know, if you need to buy fruits, vegetables, whatever, do not buy anything from the States. Buy whatever you can from Mexico, and then buy whatever you can from Canadians, you know, shop Canada, nothing else. Canada and Mexico, that's it. So we kind of have this, we've all come together, I think, in that. And it's amazing when I look at my social media fields, how many people are like on this kick now of buying Canadian, boycotting Trump's America. Because he like, even yesterday, he talked about turning us into the 51st state. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that is just talk, just to kind of get people. I mean, he obviously understands from, like, looking at it as an outsider and also as somebody that has lived in the U.S. and sort of understands the American culture, is that, you know, it seems to me that people there, they like to get routed up, you know? They like to get, like, if you can push their buttons, they're going to do whatever you ask them to do, or they're going to support any idea that you'd like. So I think some of those strategies that he's implementing to just talk and do things that maybe not necessarily have any implications, policy speaking, but just to get people talking continuously about him, about his policies, about his message, it kind of just keeps him on his side. So, because I hear this a lot about, you know, the whole Trump thing about in Mexico as well, the whole conflict about changing the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. And of course, there's this identity thing that is kind of problematic, but at the same time, I think, okay, me as a Mexican, how does changing the name of a big body of water really affect me in my life? Well, the reality is that maybe not so much. I mean, if it changes, if it doesn't change, my identity doesn't get trampled on in any means or in any form. As far as for those countries like Mexico and Canada, I think it's also like a good opportunity to kind of come together. And if I think of Mexico, for example, back in 2016, whenever, you know, Trump was making those comments, you know, I didn't really take it personally. To me, it was just a strategy, just to get people talking about him and to get people on his side. And the reality is that in Mexico, you know, there was this big movement about feeling even more prouder of your cultural heritage.
Yeah.
And there was a big shift in Mexico as well because of that. So I try to look at the positive side of all those negative things that are coming out of his mouth sometimes because, well, maybe it's also a good way for us to get shaken a little bit, whether you're Canadian or whether you're Mexican. You know, okay, maybe that's a good opportunity to, like you said, don't buy American products. You know, if you want to help your country, support your country in ways that are going to help the economy, that are going to help the people around you, that are going to help the community, right? Like all those tariffs and all those things, yes, it's going to have some impact on an economic level, but I think that's also a good opportunity for us, for countries like ours, to sort of become more united. And the reality is that so much, you know, just like so many countries depend so much on China, we also depend so much on American brands and American products.
Definitely.
So I think that's also like a wake-up moment for any country around the world to, okay, why don't we stop relying on countries like those, and why don't we start making policies so that our countries can flourish, so that whenever things like that happen outside of our borders or outside of our countries, you know, we're not as affected as we should be. I don't know. That's a tricky one. That's a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. I like that. I like what you said about that, though. definitely. And it is, I think, what Canadians are doing. Like I said, we are really coming together now and
Yeah.
trying to do the best for our country, which I think is ultimately the most important thing. But I want to ask you, what has your experience as a Mexican been like here in Finland? Have you experienced any racism? Have you had any issues? How has it gone for you? Because I look
Well,
like a Finn. You don't look
yeah,
like a Finn.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, I think at sometimes that has been the questions as I think the way some questions are being asked. Sometimes you can kind of tell that there's like a message behind those questions. Like, why are you
Okay.
here? And like, of course, the first reaction of me is, well, my wife is Finnish.
Mm.
So I think in a lot of people in the back of their mind, they think, okay, so she's Finnish, so she brought him here so that they can take care of, there's all these benefits, all these things. And until I start telling a little bit about myself and what I was doing in Mexico, the success I had in Mexico, then it kind of, the question is being asked again is that, well, then if you don't really need to be here, why are you here? Because initially I said, okay, I'm from Mexico. I'm in Finland now. So there's this, I don't know, this stereotypes that a lot of people come to this country to take care of to take all the benefits.
Yeah.
Which I don't think that's necessarily true. Like if I think of my particular situation, it was just simply because, well, my wife and I, we got pregnant at the middle of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Never in our lives we were thinking about having a life in Finland. It was just, okay, we had everything set up in Mexico. We had a pediatrician, private hospital, all the goodies, and even a doctor that spoke English for her. But then it turns out that the hospitals got overwhelmed.
Right.
And our pediatrician said, hey, you know what? The hospital's going to be very crazy. And I'm not sure whether there will be space or for me to have the possibility to help you. And they said, well, what if I get COVID? What if I can't be there? So you should start looking for other options. And of course, we looked into like the Mexican healthcare, which I had, of course, because of my job. But there was going to be some complications in terms of finding somebody that would speak the language. So that was maybe the biggest reason. So she was maybe 3 months out before the delivery, and we just decided, hey, what if we go to Finland? So it was just like, okay, I'll talk to my boss, see if I can continue, or if I have to quit, I'll quit. And we just came here literally just so that she could have birth in a place where she would be comfortable, where somebody would speak her own language. So that was the main reason why, and not because I feel life is better here. For me personally, I think I worked hard enough when I was in Mexico to build a very good life,
Right.
Financially speaking. So being here, I'm actually not doing as well as I was doing over there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's some trade-offs, like you talked about the security here. It's something that I don't have to worry about. So that's something that I like about here.
Yeah.
The fact that my daughter can be outside playing, with her little brother, and we're just in here, we're inside the house and we don't have to worry. I mean, we'll look out every once in a while because that's kind of how I'm already wired. So I can't take that away. I still look. I have to like watch out to see that everything is all right. So that's one thing. But in terms of discrimination, I think there has been a couple of times when I have felt maybe there has been some discrimination, but I try not to pay much attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, my grandmother used to say, when somebody's talking something stupid to you or something crazy to you, she says, what do you prefer, for there to be one crazy person or two crazy people?
Ah.
So it's kind of like, oh, if they have something against me, that's their problem, not mine.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I think if any kind of negative comment that I get or that I have gotten, one of my coaches once told me, okay, anytime you receive any kind of negative comment, you have to really think about them and see if there's some truth in it. So if it bothers you, perhaps there's some truth in it. If it doesn't bother you, then you shouldn't be bothered then, right? Like I said, I mean, once again, I'm not, whatever people's reasons are to come here are their own reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of like the way that I like to live and the way that I like to face those things, because then I don't like getting caught in those, I don't want to call them games, but to me, I just don't see a lot of utility in it.
Yeah.
There is discrimination, yes, there is, but what can I do about it? Nothing. I mean, I can't change the whole society.
True.
What I can do, I can just simply teach my kids, for example, to
Yeah.
learn how to navigate those situations, to identify if there's some kind of injustice being done from somebody to somebody else, try to do something about it.
Mm.
So that's kind of like the way that I see it, because, well, trying to stop it, or I just don't see anything that I can do personally to make that go away, you know. And at the same time, you know, there's a reason why sometimes people think the way that they do, right? They might have some reasons behind that. Maybe they don't like foreigners because they have seen that there has been some foreigners perhaps not acting in the correct manner,
Mm-hmm.
disrespecting the laws, disrespecting society. So if I look at it from that point of view, it's like, okay, I can understand why you may be feeling that way. Now, of course, not everybody's the same way,
Mm.
but that's something that they have to worry about. That's something that they should take care of, not necessarily me. You know, we can talk about those things definitely, and it doesn't make me and it doesn't make me uncomfortable, especially those conversations, because I come from Mexico. I learned a long time ago how to navigate the conversation. So if you're from Mexico, so is it dangerous there?
Mm.
I'm like, well, I have my arms, I have my legs, I'm all in one piece. I mean, I always like to, when I get these conversations, I say, well, you know, funny thing is that nothing has ever happened to me in Mexico, but funny thing is that I got my bike stolen here.
Yeah.
So it sort of like shifts the whole dynamic. And I mean, other ways that I'll navigate it is, well, let me ask you something. I mean, do you consume drugs? And be like, no. Are you in organized crime? No. Well, then why is it that whenever somebody says Mexico, that's the only thing that you see? I said, you know, if I think of Europe, for example, if I think of Germany, I don't think Nazis. No, I think
Exactly.
football. I think beer fest. I think amazing football. I think amazing architecture. I think amazing gastronomy, because it all depends, you know, what it is that you're looking for wherever you go.
True.
You know, there's that famous saying, bees don't waste their time trying to convince flies that honey is better than shit.
You know what? I just taught this phrase to my full-time students like 3 days ago. But in English, or in Canada anyway, we say you catch more flies with honey than vinegar.
Yeah,
But it's the
yeah,
same thing.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's the same
exactly.
thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, those conversations sometimes, I mean, I can navigate them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get uncomfortable. I can talk about those topics, and sometimes I'll be like, okay, well, how well do you know the situation in my country?
Yeah.
In order for us to have this discussion, I would like to know, you know, that you're informed, that you understand the problems that we have, why they're the way that they are.
Mm.
And so like, well, I don't know much. I just see what's in the news. And I ask, well, do you ever look at something different? I mean, are you into art? Are you into architecture? Are you into culture? Are you into gastronomy? Are you into cinema? Do you know that some of the best cinema directors come from Mexico? We have Alfonso Cuarón, Alejandro Iñárritu, Guillermo del Toro, and so. But it takes time. I mean, some people do get offended when they bring up those topics. I don't, because, well, I'm kind of used to it, because, of course, living in Mexico, working for the company that I was working for, I got a lot of those conversations when speaking to Canadian customers, American customers, about the violence, about those kinds of things. And I just bring up those facts. Like, well, are you involved in those kinds of activities? No, well, then you don't have to worry about. And now, of course, my wife is Finnish. I would say, well, you know, the funny thing is that my wife didn't want to leave Mexico. She was very happy
Yeah.
there. She
Yeah.
felt very safe.
Yeah.
It's just also using common sense.
Mm.
If you know there's a bad neighborhood, why would you want to go there?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, and there's bad neighborhoods everywhere. And if I think
Yeah.
about Canada, you go to Toronto, you got to be on your toes. Same
Yeah.
with Ottawa nowadays. You got to be on your toes. You can't just be leaving your stuff like you can here. Leave your
Yeah.
bag at the table when you go
Yeah.
when you're in a restaurant or something. It's life is different nowadays. And I like that you said that about all of the beautiful things of Mexico, because the art and the culture and actually the talented artists that I have met in Mexico, as far as like art goes, painting and jewelry making, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I always say to my husband that I thought that African art was beautiful, and African, jewelry and everything. I'm a big jewelry person, so African jewelry was beautiful, but it doesn't even hold a candle to Mexican art and jewelry making and everything. It's just unreal, the artistry in that country. It's wild, and
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone's doing everything from hand. Like everything.
Yeah.
When we drive down the street from my mom's house in Ajijic down the street, and there's like down the main carretera, and there's like all kinds of people there. They're selling their baskets, they're selling whatever, and they're sitting there making them, on the street, weaving, doing whatever it is that they're doing, metalwork, whatever, the whole way down. It's fabulous. It's so amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah, it
talented
is.
people. Yes.
Yeah, it is. And, the funny thing, of course, growing up in the U.S., I sort of obtained a lot of that American sensationalism
Mm.
that there is there. And then going back to Mexico, and I had the opportunity to sort of rediscover my culture in a very interesting way, because I was discovering it now as an adult.
Right.
So whenever I got this spark of wanting to travel the world, I remember one of my aunts told me, she said, well, why don't you get to know your culture before you go out into the world? And I started doing that. So I started traveling inside Mexico. I went to north, south, east, west, different coasts, and I was just able to find that each place is so different and
Yeah.
so diverse, even just in one country. I mean, of course, like if I think of other countries, there isn't many countries in the world that have such diversity from one place to another, just the way to speak, the cuisine, the culture, how people look. You can just find all spectrums of the rainbow, if you want to call it that, whenever you go to Mexico. So that was very, very interesting. And then, of course, once leaving Mexico and coming to Europe, it was also seeing or finding out how much European influence there is in Mexico. Like a lot of things that we thought were Mexican actually have an origin here.
Mm-hmm.
Like the bread in Guadalajara, it's French.
Right.
What else? Well, some of the music, a lot of the Mexican music has some French influence or has some Polish or German, like the German polka or the Polish polka.
Mm-hmm.
There's some elements of that in some of the Mexican music. So Mexico is just like to me, the way I explained it one time was Mexico is the perfect blend of everything that the world has to offer into one solidified culture.
Right.
Right. If we think about salsa, for example, of course, salsa is not Mexican, but it's a combination of different regions of the world. You have the drums from Africa, you have the accordion from Europe, you have some other instruments that come from the Amazon, indigenous people. So that's kind of how it is. I mean, Mexico's most popular tacos al pastor, it's not even 100% Mexican. I mean, the spit came from the Lebanese immigrants that migrated to Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have like all these things coming together to create something unique. And also thinking about the things that it has offered to the world. You can't have Italian food without Mexico. The tomatoes Mexican.
Exactly.
You can't have French pastries without Mexico because vanilla comes from Mexico. Chocolate originated in Mexico. So,
Mm.
whenever you go out and you hear like, oh, have you tasted Belgian chocolate? I say, well, it's a Belgian. It's produced in Belgium, but where does it come from? Well, I think maybe not comes from Africa. But yeah, I mean, having a full understanding of your own culture sort of gives you this sort of, I don't know if it's knowledge or a way of looking at things in a very different way. And, I mean, sometimes I like to tease. I think I remember whenever my wife and I were first dating, and she would get annoyed sometimes. She would ask me, have you ever tried Finnish coffee? And I'd be like, what, does Finland produce coffee? It's like, well, no, but it's... Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. So did you meet your wife in Mexico? Was she in Mexico when you met her?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. I was living in Playa del Carmen at the moment,
Mm.
and she was on holidays with her sister. So then we met. We went out one night. We went out for drinks, and we were having such a great time. We went to one bar, to another one, but then her sister got a little bit sick,
Oh.
and at that time, I thought, oh man, maybe I said something. So we ended up calling the night a little bit early. I walked them back to their hotel, and that was it.
Uh-huh.
Even though we had her contact information, we didn't really talk until maybe a week later. It was the last day that they were going to be there in Mexico, and they were going to be leaving soon to their hotel. So I don't know if you've been to Playa del Carmen, but there's this Fifth Avenue.
Okay.
Well, there's this famous street. It's like full of shops and restaurants called Fifth Avenue. I was walking there, and I'm not very much of a sweets guy or ice cream or desserts, but somehow or another, I failed to eat an ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
So I go into this ice cream shop, and little did I know they were there.
Oh my God.
So yeah, we're like, hey, aren't you? It's like, yeah. Hey, how are you? So we started talking. We ended up sitting there for a while, eating ice cream, just talking about everything and anything. And then I walked them back to their hotel, and then we just kind of stayed in touch.
Okay.
On a long distance. And at that time, I was planning to do my dream travel trip to Iceland. My plan was to go around the complete island.
Okay.
But then she had moved to Barcelona, and she asked, well, why don't you come to Barcelona?
Uh-huh.
And I thought, well, I'm not sure. I mean, is there something there? I said, well, let's find out.
Right.
So I canceled my trip to Iceland and bought tickets to Barcelona. And then that's kind of where everything started.
Okay.
We spent together there maybe 2 or 3 weeks. We traveled throughout Europe. We went to Paris. We went to Rome. We went to Madrid. We went to all these amazing places.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe a couple of days before I was leaving, I told her, I said, hey, well, I really like you. And I would like for this to continue, but I'll be 100% honest. I said, my life is in Mexico.
Right.
If you're up for it, come to Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
She said, okay. And she said, okay, I'm going to be here for a couple more months. I'll go back to Finland, arrange everything. And I'll see you in August.
Wow. She's got gumption. She's adventurous, huh?
Yeah. Very, very adventurous.
Yeah.
Very adventurous. Yeah. And, I mean, when we were in Mexico, it was quite special. It was like, I don't know, we went all around Mexico. I showed her my culture, and I took her back to my hometown as well, showed her where I grew up, the school I went to, how different it was. I told her the stories about the hardships, and she liked it. Well, long story short, now we're married. We have 2 kids.
Yeah, exactly. And if it wouldn't have been for COVID, maybe still living there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
Most likely. Yeah.
What language do you speak with each other? Is it
We
English?
speak English. Yeah.
English.
So here with our kids, I speak to my kids in Spanish.
Okay.
She speaks to them in Finnish,
Mm-hmm.
and we speak English. And our daughter, she's starting to speak Spanish a little bit more now, but she understands it very well. And
Yeah.
English, she just pops a few words every now and then without
Right.
us even realizing it. And our
Yeah.
son, he understands Spanish, understands Finnish. So that's also like a very very interesting thing to see develop as well.
Yeah. It's so rich, isn't it? It really adds like so much to their lives. My children obviously speak Finnish and English, and actually in Lahti, when my daughter was in the second grade, she's now in the sixth grade, but when she was in the second grade, they started offering Spanish already in the second grade. So she's been studying only if you wanted to, you didn't have to. So she's been studying Spanish since the second grade now. So she's getting better and better all the time too. And it was really nice to see when we were in Mexico this Christmas, her using the language and being, adventurous with it and actually daring enough to speak a little bit. She would order when we were in the restaurant in Spanish, and I was really proud of her to use it. But I think it's such a richness for them to speak, to be bilingual, trilingual, and get that right from the get-go, from when they're little, so that it's just like second nature.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. It's kind of interesting. Like for me, English is my second language, but whenever I was learning it, there was nothing else that would give me, or there was nothing else that sort of made me curious about other languages. Whereas for her, because she hears multiple languages as well, she's very curious.
Right.
Not only, so those three languages are, let's say, our main ones. But every now and then she'll ask my wife, hey, what are the numbers in Swedish?
Okay.
So she's already, like, even though she's barely 4 years old, she's going to be 5 soon in August, but she's already very curious on languages. And I think it also has to do, and that's something that I really like about Finland, that it's so diverse in terms of there's so many people from different parts of the world. At her daycare center, there's people from, of course, from Iraq, from Iran, from Turkey, from Sweden. From the teachers, there's some teachers that are from Estonia, from Sweden, Russian, just from all over the place. So she's exposed to so many different languages already. And it's very interesting to see that she's already curious about those things.
Yeah, that's Helsinki for you, isn't it? You're in Helsinki, right? Yeah,
no, I'm in Tampere.
Oh, you're in Tampere.
Yeah, I'm in
I thought you were in
Tampere.
Helsinki.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're in Tampere.
At some point, maybe our plan at some point is to maybe move down to Spain. And we have thought, okay, before we do that, maybe it would be a good idea to move to Helsinki and find one of those daycare centers that have also Spanish as a language. So that's one option. But here in Tampere, there was a teacher for a while. She was from Chile, so she would speak Spanish to our daughter, and I could see she was a lot more fluent whenever she was there. But she's not there anymore. That was kind of a bummer.
Right. Yeah. But still, even just the exposure, she's so young and getting the exposure to all of those languages. No, it's such a blessing. It really is such a blessing.
Yeah. And that's something that, like I was saying, when I was learning English, well, I wasn't aware of those things,
Right.
I was in a new country, and for me, learning English was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any concept of the world yet. But it's very interesting to see that her, at her age, also because we have already traveled quite a bit, she's so aware of her surroundings, and she's so smart. The other day, she was just telling us, hey, remember those grapes that we were buying at that little market in Croatia? Remember that they weren't ripe yet? I was like, you were 3 years old. How do you remember those things? Yeah.
Amazing. Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I noticed with my kids, I think it's because they were, learning two languages at the same time from when they were born, basically, that they don't have any accent problems either. Like they speak English like a Canadian. They speak Finnish like a Finn. I've heard, I don't know, but I've heard from Lily's teacher that her Spanish is like, it used to be really funny because when we would be in Mexico, for instance, before she started studying Spanish, we'd go into a store and she'd talk to someone there in her Spanish. It wasn't Spanish at all, but it had the like intonation and the pronunciation that it sounded like Spanish, but it was gibberish. And they would look at her like, okay, she sounds like she's saying something right, but this is nothing. But she, because she just picks that up. And I think it comes from learning that from when you're little, that it just, you tune your ear into it, right? So, and even with her Swedish now she started studying Swedish at school last year. And her Swedish accent is, her teacher said that her Swedish accent is totally correct as well. So that's what happens, I think, when you start being exposed to languages as a baby, that it just comes natural to hear it and you can mimic it, you can parrot it because that's what you've been doing your whole life.
Yeah. And I was reading something about that of course there's that neuroplasticity in their brain that allows them to, learn various languages at the same time, but that it also translates into other skills as well. So I think there was some study made that kids that have multiple languages are more likely to develop different skills a lot faster than a kid that only has one language, for example.
Yeah.
Because they're so open to trying new things and being adventurous. So that's something that is that I'm very happy that we're able to give her.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's something because we're here, or I like to think that no matter where we are, we would be doing the same things.
Exactly.
I think it just comes down to the parents.
Yeah, totally, definitely. And if you think that she's got like Finnish and then Spanish and English in her back pocket, those are pretty great languages to have in this continent. So really good for her. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we drifted a little bit. That's fine. So I wanted to ask a little bit about the work that you do at the university. If I remember correctly, you also teach communications, or is it cross-cultural communications?
Yeah. I teach now. I'm teaching basically everything that you studied before in communications, but I teach organizational communication, cross-cultural communication. I do some diversity stuff with Ricardo now. We have diversity marketing. Did you do that course, diversity marketing? Okay. Yeah. So it's a 24/7 course. And so I do the communication part. He does the marketing part. So we're doing some DEI things as well. But yeah, I focus on communication.
What have you noticed, the fact that you work with students from different parts of the world, how has that helped, let's say, Finnish students?
I think it helps immensely, actually. Now we are with our full-time groups, so those are the ones that are on campus. We have had a huge influx of Southeast Asian students. Nepalese, Bangladesh, Sri Lankan, Indian, Pakistani. And that is a whole area of the world that I'm not so familiar with because I haven't traveled there. I don't have really any connection to that part of the world. So I've had to actually do a lot of learning myself. Now, we also have Dinesh is from Nepal. Faisal is from Pakistan. Sajal's from India. So we have a little bit of guidance there. That's good too. But I think it's really, it's been a new aspect that's been brought in. Usually the dynamic has been Finns, Europeans, Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians. We get the odd German, the odd maybe like Dane, where Slovakia, a couple of Italians, Spanish. We actually usually get a few Spanish students every year. So that kind of, and Africans. We've always had Africans coming, Chinese and Vietnamese. But that whole Nepalese, Bangladesh, that area of the world, we haven't had so much of. So that has brought definitely a richness, I think, to our program. It's been interesting to have to learn the dynamic as well, because, for instance, one of the big problems that I've experienced in the classroom is that there is a big discrepancy between the way the genders are treated in those cultures. So a lot of the times, first of all, the boys from Southeast Asia go to their like boys' schools and girls go to girls' schools. So they haven't had very much interaction with each other. So a lot of the times that, you know, when they get here, they don't really know how to, within their own culture, relate to each other through like on a gender basis, which is quite interesting. And still there seems to be this sort of, I think in the Southeast Asian household, boys are still regarded as higher than the girls are. So I've noticed in group work, for instance, that if there's a couple of boys and a couple of girls from the same culture working together, the girls are maybe not as respected with their ideas. The boys put their ideas first. They make the decisions. The girls don't really even know how to get their decisions and their opinions in there. And so then it's been kind of like, how do I'm really not a person that wants to say something like, you're in Finland now and this is the way we do it here, because I don't believe in that. I believe in being able to come to a culture, of course, adapting to the culture, but still being able to keep your own culture as well. I that's the way I grew up in Canada. You know, we're a cultural mosaic. We're not like Americans that you're American first and then your other culture second. We respect all the different cultures, and it's very important to be able to live the way your culture lives. You know, that's the way I was brought up. So this has been, I don't want to say that to the students. However, you know, women and men are equal for the most part. There's still some issues in Finland, but they are equal. Women are very dominant, actually, in this culture. It's a more matriarchal culture than a patriarchal culture, I think.
It is.
So yeah. So I don't want to say that to them, but then on the same token, I need to kind of teach them that everyone's equal here, and your female classmates, their opinions are just as valid as yours, and they have a right to say whatever they want to say. I had this big issue last year in my English in a Global Context course. The full-time students need to pick a topic, an issue that's going on in the world. And then they need to do a whole bunch around the issue. They need to make a poster about it. They need to do a call to action. They need to make a podcast all about the issue. So one of the groups chose the LGBTQ community and the issues surrounding that. And first of all, the boys that were in the group, there were 2 Indian boys in the group, so they got outvoted when they chose what they were going to talk about. They didn't want to talk about that at all. And then they were really trying to silence the girls, talking about like maybe trans rights and these kinds of things. They really they thought it was wrong to be talking about those. And it wasn't until the girls came and told me, we don't know what to do anymore because we're really having this conflict and they're not respecting our opinions. They're telling us we're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to present about it. We're not allowed to use the rainbow in our poster that we want to make. So it's very interesting, that dynamic of gender that I haven't had to deal with before in the classroom. And I think that the great thing that's come out of all of this is that the Finnish students and the European students are becoming more aware of for instance, a lot of those students that we have in that group now, they are climate immigrants. They're like climate refugees. They came from Nepal because of the earthquake, and all of these climate-based issues that are happening in Southeast Asia are driving people out of their countries and into the West. And so to have this actually happening right on your doorstep and in your classroom, they're telling their experiences of what have happened to them there, and the Finns and the Europeans are learning how, wow, like this is real. This is really going on. This isn't some hoax. This isn't some kind of someone saying, there's no climate crisis at the moment. There really is. So they're learning about what's going on firsthand, which is, I think, really, really nice and brings a lot of value to the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's always I'm just wondering, trying to put myself in your shoes, because how do you manage those kinds of situations where you have an individual who comes from a totally different culture, where, I mean, in a way, they're kind of hardwired in a different way.
Yeah.
So accepting new ideas and accepting new belief systems, it sort of puts into question everything that they know. I'm like, I understand, of course, I understand how society is here, the terms of equality and everything, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I have a little girl and I have a little boy, right? So I definitely want the best for both of them, and I try to think as well as to, okay, how the world is changing, how certain topics are becoming a little bit controversial, and how can I could probably talk about those things in a positive way, but also instilling in them kindness and all those things. But how do you manage those things? Because like you said, I don't think it's also fair for somebody to just say, hey, now you're here. Pretty much you have to forget everything that you have learned. You have to forget everything that you know about your culture and accept ours. I just, I don't accept that either.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, our preconceptions of right and wrong are always different than other people's. Now, of course, here comes the question of, why should theirs trump ours and why should ours trump theirs? So how do you come to a middle ground with those kinds of situations because even for women, I mean, how can you teach a woman to have a voice if they're hardwired not to have one? So
exactly.
The other question is, well, do they want one?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Because at the same time, you putting the men aside for a while, thinking about the woman, now you're demanding to them to create a versions of themselves that they're not familiar with, that they have never seen at their house, that they have never seen in their country. So that could, I mean, I just wonder what are the implications of that? I don't know how
it's not
how do you manage
easy. And actually, this autumn was the first time Ricardo and I spoke to our boss and said, listen, we need help. We need help. We don't know how to navigate these waters and we need some training ourselves and that was my thing too. And so we actually got a great trainer from Helsinki. Her name was Adriana, and she's from Colombia actually. And she's a design thinker, but she also works in conflict resolution and identifying your subconscious bias and all of this kind of stuff. So she did some workshops with us. First of all, a whole privilege workshop where we looked at how privileged we are, where we are on the spectrum of privilege, and so that we could see, because, I also work in a very multicultural group. We have Pakistani, Indian, Nepalese, Simona's from Romania, Spanish. Who else do we have? Oh, we have a new lecturer from Tajikistan. So we have a very, very diverse group that we're working with. And so that brings challenges itself, right? And then when you have that in the classroom, and that was my biggest thing, it's exactly what you said. It actually wasn't about teaching the guys that they needed to respect the girls and their opinions. It was about, how do I teach my female students to be empowered and find their voice and realize, their potential and that their validity and their ideas are valid. And so we did do some training on that. And we had a really good example of it actually with the students. When Adriana was here, she was doing some training with the students. And we had one group that was working together, third-year students. They were they were all boys. There was 7 of them in total, 7 in the group, 6 guys and 1 girl. And the 1 girl out of the group was from Vietnam. And the rest of the boys were from, of course, there were a couple of Finns, but then there were Germans, a Spanish guy, a French guy. So European males and 1 Vietnamese. Now, her name, I won't say her name, but she wanted to be in that group. They got to choose their own groups, and she was really interested in the topic. So she was very brave enough to join in with that group. But they had to do this exercise. Adriana got them to do this exercise on visualization, and she made everyone draw the process of making coffee. So everyone by themselves first had to draw the process of making coffee. Then we all got together and we put all of the pictures out on a table, and no one put their names on the pictures or anything. And we took a look at, some people had the process there from like crop to cup sort of thing. Others just had finished cups of coffee and people talking with each other in their pictures. So there was a variety of different pictures. Then everyone had to take their picture back and they had to go into their groups that they were working in. And they had to organize all of their pictures, kind of like a comic strip, all the way through of this process. And they organized them all. And then they had to pick and choose which ones best described whatever they were trying to describe, which best described it. Okay. And they could actually add some, they were just stick-it notes. So it was a very small card that you had to that you had to draw it on. And you could add some things in there. So this group did their whole process. And at the end, I noticed at the end, they had a picture of a guy drinking a cup of coffee, and they had like drawn him with like big muscles and everything, And I was thinking to myself about the female student and thinking, I bet you she didn't want that picture there at the end. This was what was going through my mind, right? I didn't say anything because I had to keep my mouth shut. So I just like observed everything. And then Adriana said to them, okay, how did you decide what pictures made it into the line? Like what pictures made it into the comic strip? And he's actually from Switzerland, an exchange student. He said, well, I decided on what ones were going to be there. And if they liked it, they didn't, if they liked it, they didn't have to say anything. But if they didn't like it, they should have said something to me. And so I figured that no one said that they didn't like it. So this was the way that it should be. And so it really showed like this kind of white male European attitude. And I knew damn well that our little Vietnamese student did not like that picture. And I asked her later on, what did you think of that? And she's like, oh, I hated that picture at the end. And I was like, why didn't you say something? So this is where this like light bulb moment went off in me, that I need to learn how to empower her in a good way, that she feels confident enough to be able to voice her opinion in a situation like that. So Adriana gave some techniques that she sometimes uses in conflict resolution, and all very really nice ways of approaching things and how to get your point across, and thinking of where you are on that privilege scale and taking everyone's opinions into consideration and things like that. So I think you have to look at it. Maybe it's a slow process to learn that, and maybe slowly. It's almost like what we try to do in our degree program anyway, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're now trying to teach competencies that will be good in the workforce. So not necessarily those hard skills like being able to code, but being adaptable and being able to manage risk and uncertainty. These are the competencies that people need in the workforce nowadays, because everything's changing so fast that we can't anticipate what hard skills they're going to need. But we know we can identify those soft skills, self-direction, being able to motivate yourself and make sure that you're punctual and these kinds of things, So yeah, you have to give yourself grace. I really, truly believe in giving yourself grace and learning step by step those skills.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's also kind of like not complicated. Something that I learned when I was studying, and we would be doing those group tasks, right? Like, I think I mentioned this before, but like I'm very, I like things done a certain way. Yeah. But I also know when is a time and there's a place for everything, right? So because I know sometimes I can come across a little bit too demanding, if you want to call it that. Right. I thought, okay, so I'm going to be working with younger people than me, and I want to take care of that. So something that I noticed as well is, well, sometimes, like, how do you work with people that at the same time simply just won't take an opportunity? Yeah. Like, something that I was able to find was like, okay, I would always sort of be the last one to speak and be like, okay, whatever you decide, I'll support it 100%, right? What can we do?
Mm.
Any
Mm.
proposals? And it was just like, I already have in my mind like a bunch of things. Okay, we could do this,
I'm sure.
this and that. Right? We're like, what can we do?
Mm.
And be like, I don't know, I don't have anything. What about you? What do you think? Well, I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention to that. So I think one of them, I understand the whole cultural aspect, but I think also it's important to also, I don't know, somehow teach younger people that, hey, if you really want to get to somewhere, if you really want to get to a certain place in life, you also have to get involved.
Yeah.
Right? At sometimes it may be uncomfortable, and whenever I would talk about these things sometimes to the group, like I would always say, hey, let me know if I'm coming in too strong. So
Right.
I would like to set the expectation that, hey, sometimes I can come a little bit strong with my ideas.
Yeah.
Let me know if that's the case. I'm 100% like, I'll listen.
Mm.
Right? But sometimes even if you say those things, sometimes people just don't say it. And if you remember from certain courses and certain lessons, you go through a whole lesson and you ask, is there any questions? The reality is that there is hundreds of questions, but maybe out of 30 people, 3, maybe 10%. Well, 1% will ask, well, hey, I actually have this question, right? So that was a little bit tricky as well. And I always wonder, like, as a university professor, how do you manage those things to make sure that you're not confusing one thing for the other?
Mm. And I think too, I'm sure you noticed it in your group work that, especially with the part-time group, with the adults, everyone has different expectations and everyone has different markers of how well they want to do. So you, for instance, want a 5 all the time. You want that perfect grade and you strive towards that perfect grade. But then maybe there's someone that just wants to pass. They don't care. They just want a 1. They just want to get the course done. And that's really difficult with expectations to deal with, because you've got like people who really want to excel and do really well in what they're doing. And then the other ones who maybe are, they're there because their boss has said they have to get a degree or they're not going to be able to move up the ladder and they don't even want to be there. Maybe work has forced them, or they're unemployed and their only option now is to go back to school and they're not really into it. They haven't studied for 25 years and they don't want to. There's a lot of, especially with that part-time group, there's a lot of different dynamics playing out there. So cultures, because there's different cultures, different ages, different expectations, different skills, different life experiences and work experiences. So I think that group work that you guys often had to do was very demanding and very difficult, but it taught you a lot too, didn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, well, like managing those things, and the reality as well is something that I have learned as well, is that, it's always going to be impossible to please everybody.
Yeah.
And it always, for me, it always came down as, okay, we're doing this as a team, but because I also have this competitive drive, like I want to win.
Yeah.
If you're not going to pick your ball, I'll pick it up, right? You'll benefit from it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you learn or not, that's really not my concern, right?
Yeah.
But like, I'm here to win. So that's kind of like the things that I learned as well, is that, well, sometimes you're going to be identifying those things. And of course, at a school level, there's only so much that you can do, and also not take it personally, like I said, like some people just want a passing grade, and that's fine, people get whatever they want. But then but at a working level, you just know that those things are just not going to cut it.
Yeah.
And they're not going to turn for good outcomes. But at the same time, that's something that I've seen here, that there's a lot of tolerance for, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but there's a lot of tolerance for people's inadequacies at times, in my opinion. and I have seen it in the workspace, where, things should be done and they just don't get done.
Yeah.
I have no idea why. I mean, I have been sometimes in meetings where, instead of being present in the meeting, the guy's going through Facebook videos.
Mm,
And then it kind of makes me wonder, it's like, well, then no wonder that thing is not getting done or in the
exactly.
proper way. So those are some of the, maybe, I don't know, cultural differences that I have seen as well. There seems to be like a higher tolerance for those kinds of attitudes, and somebody getting fired seems that it takes a lot for
Oh,
somebody to
yeah.
get really fired. Have you seen those things as well?
Yes. Yes. And once you get that permanent contract, it takes a lot to get you fired. You got to do something really bad in like 3 times.
Yeah, you gotta like
before
slap the
they can
balls or
fire
something.
you.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, it's crazy. It's crazy.
yeah,
I've seen that here too as well. Yeah, definitely. But I
yeah.
wanted
Like,
to ask you, so
yeah,
like with your group work that you were doing, the first year, of course, we put you into groups because none of you knew each other. But then did you then were able to make your own groups later on in second and third year. So do you think that those of you who were always on the ball, wanting to do your best, striving for that 5, did you find each other and then
yeah,
work together? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
After that, like once we identify like who were the A players, if we want to call it that,
Yeah.
it was like, okay, let's work together on this.
Yeah.
And then even when we got separated for X or Y, then we had to like find somebody else. Like somebody may have already worked with somebody that was very good. And be like, hey, I invited this person because this person works very well. I was
Yeah.
like, all right, bring them on. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that also made it quite easier. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the way it should be. And you know what? And you can see it even after they have graduated. They're continuing to like pursuing things and pushing
Yeah.
themselves, managing family life, work life, plus studies,
Mm.
and it's always nice to work with those kind of people because you just know they're just, they like to hustle and they don't make
Yeah.
excuses.
Yeah.
That, yeah, it's always so enjoyable to work with people like that.
Mm.
The other ones, well, personally, I just don't have a lot of tolerance for those kinds of things. I don't say anything. I'm just like, well, that's their problem,
Mm.
and because I don't know them on a personal level. But like, if I think for me, part of the reason why I think I'm good at what I do is because I've also been bad at it.
Right.
And I've had, people very close to me, tell me, hey, I know you have more because I've seen it. You got to step it up. You can step it up. And that goes all the way back to even playing sports,
Right.
whereas you have, I had a conversation with one of my coaches and we were talking about this topic. It's like, hey, how do you find the right balance to not break somebody, but then push them just hard enough so that that person can find their own spark or potential? And of course, the coach was explaining those things. And he says, well, sometimes we like to get like personal with the player, with the athlete, by challenging him to a certain degree and seeing what he has. Maybe it's going to make him mad a little bit. Maybe it's going to piss him off. Maybe he's going to hate us. But then eventually, he says, we'll get a call back many years down the road saying, Coach, if you hadn't pushed me the way you did, I would not have accomplished anything what I have accomplished. So those are some of the, that's also like some of the cultural differences that I see here in terms of, I don't know. And that's something that I would like to understand, like how that works here, because I don't see a lot of pushing here. And from our cultures, there is a lot of pushing. But I see it in a positive way. I see it in a healthy way. It has worked for me. Obviously, it can't work with everybody. Like those are some of the things that I still kind of wonder, like how do people define drive here, given that society is a little bit more chilled, more relaxed, more work-life balance? How have you grappled with those things? I mean, if we think about North America, there's this hustle mentality.
Yeah, definitely.
And here's a little bit different. I mean, just from your story, you come into Finland, then going through all these works and doing all these things,
Mm.
you have that hustle mentality in you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that is, I'm Generation X. I think that's my generation too. In North America, we were, we're the latchkey kids that parents left to their own devices, and we kind of had to fend for ourselves right from the get-go. So I think it comes a little bit from my generation, but also from my culture. And it is different here. And sometimes it gets me a little bit irritated sometimes. Like my daughter plays volleyball. She plays on a volleyball in a volleyball club, quite a good club actually in Lahti. But they're all kind of separated in their different variety of different levels in the one team. Because there's a lot of girls playing. I think that they've got something like 25, 30 girls. So they've divided them into teams, but they're equally divided. And I'm like, shit, like why don't they put one team with all the good ones on there, that have the drive and really want to play, but they're only 12.
The A team.
They're only 12. So I get that, but it's totally different in Canada, where my friends' kids are busting their ass playing AAA hockey and fighting it out, and it's totally different world compared to here, definitely. So, and with my students, I don't do it so much with the part-time group, but with the full-time group, there's a lot of them that really piss me off because I see that potential in them, but they either don't have the drive. They've never been pushed, so they don't have that drive. They haven't had to scrap it out, So they don't have that drive. They kind of just coast through life. And then it just happened to me a couple of months ago that one student, he was angry about his grade. Actually, he got a 2 and he was very angry because he thought he should have at least gotten a 3. Now he hadn't done anything to get even a 3. So we had the meeting and I was like, you really piss me off because you actually have the potential. You're very smart and you have the potential to really do great and actually have a great career and be very successful in your life. But you're lazy. You're lazy and you don't want to put in the effort and you think we're just going to give you like a 5? Like what is going on here? If you I told him that you spend more time trying to get out of doing the assignment than actually just doing it. I don't understand. So if you just use your potential, it's very frustrating as a teacher to see someone with that. I can see it in him. He's really smart, can talk as well. He can talk the talk, but he cannot walk the walk. He has no follow through whatsoever. It's very frustrating because if he just put in a little bit of effort. Yeah. So, and I see that quite often as a teacher. I see it often. Yeah.
How do you think we can change that as parents?
So my parenting, the way that I parent is that I, of course, I'm not one that pushes the kids. Always from the start, when they first started at school, I said, as long as you tried your best, that's all I want. So if you fail, I failed lots. I'm terrible in math. I used to fail math all the time. If you fail, that's fine. As long as you tried your best and you did everything to pass, So I've always done that with the kids, and they know that if they come home with a shitty grade, they're maybe a little bit scared to tell me, but they know I'm not going to be upset if they can prove to me that I really, and I know if they studied. I live in the same house as them, so I know if they studied. I know if they put in the effort. The good thing about you'll find this, that once they get into school, the good thing is that we have this system where the teachers keep the parents really informed. So exactly what tests are coming. You know exactly what they're studying in all their courses. You know if they're having issues because they talk to you about it right away, so you can maybe nip those issues in the bud before they get too big. So the relationship between the teacher and the parent is close, at least in primary education and in secondary. Now in high school, it's much more independent, but in the first 2 levels, it's very close. So I would know exactly what my kids were up to and what they were doing. And so they've never felt the pressure that they have to be the best, but they have to try their hardest. And I think that that's the most important thing because it's life, right? You're never going to be good at everything. You're never going to be the best at everything. There's always someone stronger, faster, better looking. There's always someone better than you. So as long as you can put forth your best effort and teach your kid that as long as you did your best and you did all you could, it doesn't matter what the end result is. It's like the path to get there. That's the most important thing. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in our staff meetings is failure, and how failure actually, can make you who you are.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's good to fail. It's good to have to go through those trials. It's good to fail. It's good to not be the best. It's good to have to compete with other people. And that's sports. Sports does that for you. It's really important. Both of my kids play sports, and they actually do music as well. So that was one of my other things too, is that you have to play a sport and you have to do music, some kind of art, whether it's art or music or whatever. So my son plays the drums and he plays volleyball, and my daughter plays volleyball and she plays the piano and sings. So, they have those kind of commitments that they have to honor. Here in Finland, it's totally different than the States and Canada. Nothing's organized by school, right? So everything that you want your kids to do, you got to put them in there. You got to take them there. You got to pay for it, all of that kind of thing. Whereas in the cultures that we grew up in, it was all offered at school. We played school sports. We did drama. We did part of the band, whatever it was that you were doing in school. They don't do that here. So it's up to the parent to make sure that they get their kids. And what's really great about that, like with my daughter, for instance, I remember, because I used to play soccer when I was young, and I remember that feeling of being on a team and being part of a team. And I think it's especially important for girls. Girls love to be part of that team. And she has her friends at school, and then she has her volleyball friends that are from totally different parts of the city, totally different parents. And it's really, really good for her to have those two sets of friends. She sees different perspectives. She sees different ways of living, and it's been really, along with the fact that she's exercising and she loves it and she's playing on a team, and these friendships that she's made are really, really crucial, especially for girls, I think, at that age. I know for boys too, but I noticed my son liked to play volleyball, but she's like kind of obsessed with it, but not so much the sport. It's everything that goes around it. The friends, the tournaments, the fun. They have this, like, it's called the Power Cup, that happens in a different city every year, and it's for 5 days after school ends, and they go and stay overnight. They're away from their parents. They go and stay overnight, and there's like something like 5,000 kids that go there to play volleyball, and boys and girls. And so, all of these different experiences are what I can see are molding her into the person that she is, because she gets different perspectives on life, not just from her teacher and her classmates. Because what it's like here, I don't know if you know this, but grades 1 to 6, they're in the same class all the time from grade 1 to grade 6, and they have the same teacher the whole time from grade 1 to grade 6. Yes, they don't change the teacher. So she's had Annalisa has been her teacher all the way through. So of course you get comfortable in that, right? You get comfortable with the people that you're in the classroom with every day. You get comfortable with the teacher. They all know each other very well. So it's important to have those outside influences. I think really, really important. So that would be my one thing about parenting, is that you make sure your kids do things outside of school and they have hobbies and other interests, and they're not just on their phones and computers. And yes, exactly. They of course have time for phones and everything else too. I'm not one that I don't monitor. I trust her, so I don't monitor what she's doing. I know she snaps, and I know she does some TikTok things, but I know I could monitor if I wanted her to, but I trust her because she hasn't broken my trust yet with that. And I don't say, okay, you're only allowed to use it for 30 minutes from 5:30 to 6 or something. I don't do that. If she's got her homework done, she's gone to her practice, got her homework done, she's relaxing, then she can, use her phone, sort of thing. Hey, my battery's about to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I would say is my parenting tip.
It's great. It's great.
What about you? What do you think?
Oh, yeah. Because I definitely grew up, I had, I guess, different school of thoughts. One of them was growing up as a very young kid in Mexico, and then sort of my developmental area as a man in the U.S. So it was very different.
Where were you
But
in the States?
in Texas,
Oh,
football country.
nice. Is that what you played?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what you played. Yeah.
Yeah. So American football, just to be clear for the listeners.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
For me, it's football and soccer. So, it's, yes.
Yeah. So, you know, now that I'm a parent, my kids are starting to get to an age where I want to start helping them discover the little spark in them. Here's sort of the philosophy that I've gone back and forth. Do you remember what you wanted to do when you were a kid? I remember I wanted to be a professional soccer player, right? I wanted to be a professional boxer. And then I wanted to be a fireman, all those basic things. But the ones that I was able to sort of play and be a part of was sports, football, soccer. So I think whenever we tell our kids, you can be anything that you put your mind to, that is true. But it also, I think sometimes many of us parents sometimes just leave it to the kid 100%. And I don't think that's the way it works. Or at least based on the conversations that I have had now with great people, is that, okay, the kid has a desire, great, but there has to be a lot of involvement from the parent to make sure that that kid has the right resources and the right tools so that he can become the best that he can become at anything. So the question that I was having with my coach the other day was because the reason I was asking him those questions is because he has two sons. Both of them played Division I football in the U.S. for big universities, Texas Tech and West Virginia.
Okay.
Both of them went on to play pro. One of them still playing pro for the Edmonton Elks in Canada.
Yes.
So
CFL.
Yeah, at the CFL. Yeah. So I was asking him, so what sort of parenting strategy did you implement to your kids so that they could become what they have become? And besides being great sportsmen, they're also great human beings. They have a great work ethic. One of them is now actually the offensive coordinator for the University of Arizona. So they continue to thrive everywhere they go. So he said, Daniel, everything comes down to what you exemplify at home. As a man, you work all day long. When you come home, you're tired. Are you tired enough? Are you too tired to play with your kid that wants to play every single evening football? Said your wife is going to if your wife has a job and she's going to be tired, are you man enough to make dinner for the family? Are you, man enough to, take the kids for the weekend so that your wife can go shopping on the weekend so that she can, just blow some steam off because she has been with the kids all week long? He said, everything comes down to those things, to being really present. It's not just going to work and coming home and sitting on the sofa and watching TV. He says, from all the kids that make it to the university level at a high level, from high school, only 1% make it to the university level. And from the university level, another 1% make it to the pros. He says, so a lot of the things that I did, it was that, okay, I understand what are the things that I know that I can provide to my son, because he was also a football coach. He says, I surrounded him among some of the best coaches in the country, right? But at the same time, I never pushed them. They had the desire, but then we also had very serious conversations at a very young age. It's like, okay, what do you want to do? A kid's going to tell you, and kids are honest. And I tell you, Dad, I want to be a professional football player. So sometimes a lot of us parents, we think, yeah, that would be nice. But like, okay, are you really also on board with the kid to make sure that he gets to where he wants to be? Are you going to get him the tools that he needs? So he said, I never pushed them. I also let them be kids, I also made sure that there was fun in their life, that there was also some sort of spirituality, of course, and that I owe that to my wife. He said, like, in the summers, I would normally give them June off, and it was always up to them. I would ask them, now, do you want to go out there and be a kid? or do you want to do something special? So, and they would say, I want to do something special. It's like, all right, then. So then we're going to get to work. So if you choose to take this route, it's going to be serious work.
Mm.
But then whenever you look back, you're going to be thankful for it.
Mm.
Right? Because then he says, Daniel, you know, many people go on through their lives. They're 30, 40, and they think, I wonder what would have been if I really stuck with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like those are some of the takeaways that I'm getting now. And of course, you know, those topics that you mentioned that, you know, schools here, they don't provide like sports programs. So it's kind of up to the parents into finding those right resources. So that's kind of also what I'm doing with this podcasting. Okay, I want to talk to interesting people. I want to talk to, you know, people that are good at what they do and figure out what is sort of back engineer the things that they did so that I can also apply those things with my kids and learn from other parents, learn from other professionals about how I can create an environment where my kids thrive.
Yeah.
Because what he was saying is like, you know, they had a lot of options, but one of the options that was a non-negotiable is that you're going to become something of you're going to create something out of your life.
Yeah.
That's non-negotiable.
Exactly.
And I think that's just setting high standards for yourself and also for the kids. And I think that's just going to set a path towards not only success, but also a lot of resilience to whatever's going on in the world. You know, a lot of people may say, yeah, I don't care about money. I don't care about all these things. But it's not about that. It's the ability to tackle problems if you're in a situation where you can take care of problems.
True.
I don't know. That's kind of how...
And being a good human. A good human. Like, I'm very conscious of raising 2 kids to be good humans. Respectful, kind. Like I always say about my son is the thing that I love about you most is your heart, because he's just the sweetest boy. He really, you know, he wouldn't say anything bad about anyone. He's very positive. He's very upbeat. He's, so just raising good humans to have empathy and be respectful and be hardworking and contribute to society and make sure that everyone has that equal opportunity. And that's what's the most important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And there's just so much to it. And, I just think it's also our job as parents, you know, if we don't know, we have to look for those answers, you know.
True.
We can't be coming home and watching TikTok or watching Instagram.
Exactly.
All living long and letting the kids playing with the iPad.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I mean, of course, you know, like for my little 4-year-old, I try to find ways that can spark her curiosity, whatever it may be. You know, she likes running.
Right.
So, yeah, like I do things in a fun way so that she likes running, so that it's not like I'm forcing her to do something. But like I just know that, like you said, being part of a team does so much to a young girl.
Yeah.
You know, you get to work as a team. You get to learn how to work with people. Those are like those are very useful fundamentals for an adult as well. You know, if you have never worked in a team, how can you expect to be in a job where you have to count on others, where you have to be accountable for the work that you do with your team if you have never worked in a team?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of those things can be learned through sports, and also confidence.
Yeah, definitely.
As a little kid, if you're playing at a sports team, you're going to have a crowd. You have to perform something. So that's already setting a certain level of competence that eventually will lead into confidence.
Yep.
And that gets translated into the university, into your work life. Just expose them to people.
Yeah. And like I said, learning how to fail. Like about 3 weeks ago, we were at a volleyball tournament, and my daughter's team, they played 3 matches and they won 2 out of 3. And the second one they lost, and it was close. They had 3 games and it was close the whole way through. And man, she was pissed. And she was getting pissed at her teammates. She was pissed at herself, and she was just pissed. I could see her, you know, on the court. I could see how pissed she was. And afterwards, I was like, Lily, you can't win everything all the time, you know. But man, she was pissed, and it was a good pissed, you know, because you learn you have that desire to win.
Yeah,
and
she cares. That's why she's pissed.
Exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
and she also noticed, and we actually talked about it on the way home, she actually noticed that the more pissed she got, actually she played worse because she wasn't able to control her emotions. So then there would be stupid mistakes that were made, you know? And then the crowd from the opposing team, whenever they would serve, they were yelling like things and stuff. And so she had to try to tune them out, and she couldn't do that so well, you know? So there was a whole bunch of things that came into play from that one game that we talked about it afterwards. And she was like, I was getting so angry because there was one dad and he kept yelling. I don't know what he was yelling, something in Finnish. And it was making her really angry that he was yelling that. Every time I had to serve, he was yelling and I couldn't concentrate. And then she noticed too, in the third game that they played, they were playing a team that was way worse than them. And actually the score didn't reflect that at all, because you know how it goes, right? When you play a team that's not as good as you end up going down to their level, and they seem to come up to your level and you go down to theirs, and they were making like really bad mistakes. Her team was making really bad mistakes that they would never make normally because of wild balls, you know, like coming over the net that weren't controlled, that they're so used to having a controlled ball come over that when it was all over the place, they couldn't handle it. So it's all of those things that you learn in a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's something so simple. Like,
Yeah.
I've been in situations like that, the same situations that your daughter had, where the crowd gets in your head. And I remember I told the coach once, and he said, "That's great." I'm like, "Why is that great?" He said, "You just found something to work on."
Exactly.
And I was like, "How so?" He's like, "Well, think, if there's things that are outside of your control that are determining the outcome of your performance, what would happen if they didn't bother you?" So, well, I would perform better. Well, that means then there's something that you got to work on. So he will say, okay, everything that you connect to failure, try to write it down, or try to list it down and make it real, and figure out a way that you can work on that thing so that it's no longer a factor in the outcome that you want. It's like anytime you get one of those, it's like, yes, experience the moment, get the rage, whatever. But then afterwards, once you have cooled down, go back to that moment and think, what are the things that bothered me about the specific situation that prevented me from executing? And then figure out a way to work those things so that in the future, you don't have that problem anymore.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. So next time your daughter is feeling that way, say, hey, that's great. You know?
Yeah.
Let's work on that.
Exactly. Let's work on that.
Yeah.
That's good advice.
Yeah. So going back a little bit on the topic of communication, what would be a piece of advice that you would give, or what would you say are some of the important elements within effective communication that a young person coming out of high school, going to the university, should work on to go to that next level?
Listening skills. Listening skills are the most important thing about communication. If you are not a good listener, you are never going to be a good communicator. That is my tried and true rule, because I've come up against so many people who actually don't listen. They're so conscious of what they want to say next that they're actually not listening at all to what the person that is saying that's talking to them. And you can see it. I work with people like that are, you know, they're not listening at all to what you're saying. And then when they respond to what you're saying, it doesn't even make sense because they haven't listened to actually what you've said. And they're in their own head and thinking about what they want to say and what they want to tell. And I swear that if you are not a good listener, you'll never be a good communicator. That is the number one thing.
Right. Of course, it does I think it's a lot easier said than done, right? To listen. But could you just unpack it a little bit? What are the steps or what are some steps that somebody could take so that they could become a good listener? Because I think they might be mistaking listening with hearing.
Yes.
Right?
And listening has a lot about, like, the whole main factor of listening is being present, right? Being present. looking, like even you and I, when we're talking to each other, we're looking, even though we're on camera, we're totally looking at each other in the eyes the whole time, right? So we're listening. Listening comes with a variety of things. It's like watching your reaction, watching if you smile or you frown, if you raise your eyebrows, if you raise your hands, if you nod your head like you're nodding it right now. All of these subtle, markers that are communication markers that we give that are really, really important. And all of that comes to being a good listener. And yeah, you're right. Not like hearing, but actually observing and listening and looking at everything that's going on with you. I have to do it all the time in the classroom. When I'm teaching something, I'm watching the students. I'm gauging their reaction. I'm looking around to see if anyone's sleeping. I'm like, are they nodding their heads? Are they getting it? Are they looking confused? And this is what then gives me the indication if I need to explain something further, if they got it, if it's made an impact. There's a whole bunch of things. Sometimes as a teacher, you can just see that light bulb go off. You actually physically see. And that's what we all want. That's why we do this job. It's like it's like a drug for us. If we see that light bulb go off in a student's head, we know we did our job. We know we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. And that comes with observing. So that's why, like, when I'm lecturing, I very, very rarely have PowerPoint slides that I'm going through. I'm like standing in front of the classroom, engaging with them. I know my topic, so I don't need those slides. So it's better for me to just engage with them, get them thinking about it, get them to feedback to me with their opinions. It's easy to do when you're teaching communication courses. So you can get the opinions of the students and gauge if they're getting it or not. And then you see that light bulb moment. If you're too busy going through your slides, you miss it. You miss what's going on in the classroom. So you need to be a good listener and you need to observe. If you don't do that, you're not a good communicator.
100% true.
Mm-hmm.
As I continue to embark my journey into podcasting, what's some advice that you would give me to continue to improve my communication skills?
I think you're doing really good. And actually, you're a good listener. And that is one thing about podcasting, I think, too, and what I had to learn. And I learned it when I was working as an IELTS examiner, because for me, conversation, and that's what you do in IELTS, right? You ask them a question and they have to respond. And for me, you should be giving those kind of clues that, oh yeah, good, yes, and giving those markers that you get what they're saying. But actually, IELTS doesn't want you to do that. IELTS wants you to sit back and not say a word. And when my examiner, he was like my trainer, when he would listen, because we have to record all of our interviews that we do, he would listen, and always the feedback I got is, you're talking too much. You're saying, yeah, okay, even those little markers, you're saying all of those dialogue markers too much. You need to sit there in silence. And that was very difficult for me. That was a skill that I needed to learn and practice. And I think it comes with podcasting too, that you need to, of course, you're having a conversation, but then when your guest is talking, you need to sit back and listen and let them talk. And sometimes that's not so easy. But so it's this kind of like give and take sort of thing, I think and this is maybe a little bit easier when we are seeing each other, but if it's just a fully just recording and we're not actually looking at each other and talking to each other on video, then it's even more important. If you're doing it just basic, like audio with no visual, it's even more important to just sit back and listen and let it go. Yeah.
Yes. How can you avoid the use of excessive filler words? For example, now that I've been listening to my episodes, the first episode was completely full of and obviously. There's one part in the first episode that I think I say in one sentence like 4 times. And I was like, Jesus. But of course, I want to hold myself to high standards and compare myself to the best. So of course, I want to go there. So how do you work on those things?
That's a good question. I think that the first thing is actually noticing it, right? Because maybe, I don't know that I've noticed that in you so much when you speak, but maybe it is one of your idiosyncrasies that you do say, or lots of people say like. And I noticed that when people are presenting or pitching or those kinds of things. So the first step is to actually notice it, I think. So it's good that you've noticed. And that's what happens when you hear yourself talking, right? All of a sudden you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was doing that at all. So I think becoming aware of it and then like literally biting your tongue, being conscious of it all the time. So then you're practicing, and then just becomes second nature that you don't do it anymore. Yeah, it takes practice. Everything takes practice. Like you said, that you when we were first talking, you said how you can see that these podcasts are getting better and better every time you do it. It's because you're getting more comfortable and you're practicing.
Yeah, practice makes perfect. Yeah, 100%. One thing that I want to touch base before we end the session. So as a university professor and sort of seeing the global point in which we are, I saw this meme multiple times now on LinkedIn and I think on Instagram as well. So there's this meme sort of comparing Europe to the US, as a economic power, where they're comparing that, okay, well, in the US, they just released, they have Chat GPT, Elon Musk is catching massive rockets with a tower and doing all these crazy things with innovation, whereas in Europe, we're very proud of that little plastic thing that prevents the bottle cap from falling off. Yeah, which in a way, I do understand it, and it's kind of hard to compete with countries like that given how much regulations there is here, but also if those regulations are sort of being something that is preventing innovation here. And now, you're a university teacher. What message would you give to those students out there so that we can thrive as a society, as an economic power, whether it's Finland or whole Europe, so that we don't get those comparisons in the future?
Yeah.
Maybe not right now, but in the long term.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's really a difficult thing. And the one thing, I think that you and I have talked about this before, but the one flaw that I see about Finland is that they don't know how to sell themselves. It's really a pity because they come up with great innovations. They have great ideas. This country, how it's light here 24 hours a day in the summertime. Why isn't everyone coming here to play golf from the whole world? Because they could golf 24 hours a day here. You'd think it would be a golfing haven. The weather is good in the summertime. It's light all the time. We have beautiful golf courses. We have all of these potential to actually put Finland on the map for things. But Finns are so reserved in that sense. It's very difficult for them to sell themselves, to brag about themselves, to say that they would. There's so much potential here that I think is lost just because Finns can't sell themselves. It's very frustrating to me.
So in a way, the virtues that they have here are also in a way their Achilles tendon?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. I have seen that in golf. I mean, I play golf as well.
Yes.
And it's incredibly difficult to play here because you have to go through all this process to get a green card, to become part of a country club or to have a membership with some club. And I mean, maybe this is the arrogant Daniel here, but I played at some of the most beautiful courses in the world, in the US and in Mexico. And to have all these hurdles here just to go play golf, I just find it very unnecessary. You're back. Yeah. I just found it very unnecessary. And I think a lot of those hurdles that we place here sort of prevent the world from seeing who we really are as well.
I totally agree. Yes.
Also, I had a conversation at some point, I'm not going to say any names, but I was trying to get in this project for this resort here in Finland that was looking to attract international travelers. And we're having a discussion. I said, well, I think you have everything here that you can offer to tourists, right? The landscapes, the nature, quality ingredients, everything. But if you could take your customer experience to the next level, you're going to put Finland on the map. And, sadly, they were not able to see that that message. And well, it also kind of makes me wonder, well, then, don't expect to go global if you're not willing to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
And maybe take yourself out of that box. And I think it also has to do with the story that you tell that you tell yourself. If you tell yourself you're shy, you're always going to be shy. So in order to sell something, you can't be shy.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Melanie, is there anything else that you would like to touch before we go
Nope,
home?
and I gotta go because now I'm going to another meeting.
All right then. Well,
we're
Melanie
actually meeting with the city. We're meeting with the city to sell them, Ricardo and I, to sell them an idea of how to promote the city through our students. So let's see what they think.
That sounds interesting. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So what else are you working on right now that the listeners could be interested in looking into?
We have changed our whole pedagogy, actually, to design-based learning. You did a little bit of design thinking, I think, with Ricardo and throughout your 3 years, but now we've changed our pedagogy to design-based education. So we're doing a lot more collaboration with companies, innovation, coming up with ideas, prototyping, testing, all of this kind of thing. And so now our third-year studies are 25 credits of that, mandatory credits that you have to do, and then 5 credits of research skills.
All right.
Yeah, so that's totally different, and we're all learning this new pedagogy. It's been a challenge, but a good one. So we just had a big project, actually, where we were raising funds for a private primary school in a village in Kenya. And that was their project for the whole autumn. And it went really, really well. Lots of hurdles, lots of tears along the way, but in the end, it went really, really well. So yeah, we're in the middle of a curriculum change and how we're upgrading our methods. So it's interesting times for us at home.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to keep
Melanie,
ourselves competitive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Melanie, where can people keep up with you?
LinkedIn, I think, is probably my best place if you're wanting to talk to me on a professional level. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not there so much. I'm also on IG, but I keep it private. So I would say LinkedIn, or of course they can email me at melanie.kirwa@hump.fi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Melanie, it has been an absolute pleasure. A lot of fun.
It has been fun. Definitely.
Yes,
it's so good to see
do this
you.
again sometime.
For
Likewise.
Sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now that I know that you're in Tampere, now I know you're a lot closer. I thought you were in Helsinki. I'm going to be getting you on this campus more. You're only like half an hour away.
Yeah. Count on it. All right, then, Melanie. Well,
okay.
Thank you so much. All right,
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Talk to you soon.